Good morning, everyone. It was a wonderful evening last night and a fantastic welcome from the traditional owners. I'm absolutely thrilled to see the young university rankings are making headlines in Australia and across the rest of the world this morning. The conference hashtag was trending in Britain yesterday, and we're creating a real buzz here in Australia and around the world. So it's a very exciting time. It feels like we're already well underway. As we've seen from the video, there's some absolutely fantastic content to come. There was a time, I think, when younger universities, would worry that they simply just couldn't compete with their older competitors. Some universities had centuries to accumulate vast wealth. They had huge, deep alumni networks acting as their ambassadors across the world and digging into their pockets to provide philanthropic funding. They often sort of custodians of national treasures and part of the fabric of great cities. So they have had natural advantages, and it's seen in the traditional university rankings. But I think in today's rapidly changing world, where risk-taking, innovation, and the willingness to try to do things differently will be the secret of success, I think young universities do have also a distinct advantage. They can have a competitive edge. Brian Mcgrath, the president of Ireland's Dublin City University, who hosted the 2015 Young Universities Summit, encapsulated the spirit when he wrote, "The young universities are unhampered by tradition and outdated modes of operation. They tend to be agile, dynamic, and keen to adapt and adopt modern organizational practices." Last year's host, Jaume Casals, the rector of Spain's #1 young university, Pompeu Fabra University in Barcelona, who sadly couldn't be with us because he faced a re-election for his role yesterday, and he was thankfully confirmed in his role. He said, "Being young and small has allowed us to be more proactive and flexible in today's changing environment." And we've already heard from Peter, and we'll hear more from Peter, and we can see for ourselves QUT is a fantastic living example of a dynamic, thrusting, engaged university, and I'm thrilled that we get to be on this wonderful campus and experience at firsthand QUT's competitive advantages. So thank you, Peter, and to QUT for hosting us and for helping us put together this wonderful gathering. And it is a truly wonderful gathering. I'm thrilled that although this is a niche event, by definition, it's a group of young universities. There's not many of you in the world, but there are more and more of you emerging. We do have the biggest Young University Summit so far. We have approaching 200 delegates, but what's exciting for me is we have 31 different countries represented today. And I think that diversity is seen in the ranking itself. We saw how many countries make the Young University rankings. And this diversity, I think, again, is another great competitive advantage. The summit brings together university leaders from all over the world, from different countries, different cultures, different governance systems, and they're all universities at different stages of their institution's development. We've got institutions founded this side of the millennium, and in each decade since the 1960s, we have one or two of the fastest rising universities in the world, and we even have a couple of old-timers to share their wisdom. And we're combining top academics with partners from outside the university sector. We come together to share our success stories, our ideas, our data, and to share our inspiration. And I hope and expect that the summit will act as a beacon leading the way to the rest of this university sector. So I wrote in my program notes the old phrase from the polymath and laureate Rabindranath Tagore. He said that, I said a possible motto for the summit could be his phrase, "Age considers and youth ventures." But there's another phrase I like to repeat from our first summit in Miami, which was, "You don't have to be old, you just have to be bold."
Last night, as you know, Senator Simon Birmingham, the Federal Minister for Education, welcomed us to the summit via video. And we had a really good plan for this morning. To complement that, we were going to start the morning with Karen Andrews MP, who's a Federal Minister who works with Simon Birmingham, to commence proceedings. We didn't take into account the vagaries of Gold Coast motorway traffic this morning, but we're delighted that she is here now, and I would like to welcome her here. As Assistant Minister in that space, she obviously will have a range of interests, including the potential of partnerships between universities and the vet sector. Universities oftentimes think it's simply about us, but as we look around the world, we see the emergence of very powerful strategic partnerships between some of the great universities and the vet sector. I'm referring to some of the examples in Britain for a start. Also, of course, we all have a preoccupation with the skills that are going to be required in the workforce in the increasingly disrupted world and economy that we're working in. I can say at a more local level, it's great to not only welcome Karen Andrews here this morning, but to welcome her back. She is a mechanical engineering graduate of QIT, that is to say before 1989, Phil, well before 1989. This may not surprise, she was one of only 2 women in the mechanical engineering cohort in that year's graduating class. So it's great to welcome you this morning, Karen Andrews.
Well, good morning. Thank you very much for that introduction, Vice-Chancellor. And yes, I did graduate before 1989, and you can Google my age if you'd like. It's all publicly available. It is great to be back here at QUT, and it brings back a lot of memories, all very positive, of my time here at QIT as it was at the time. Can I acknowledge Professor Peter Coaldrake, AO, the Vice-Chancellor of QUT and the university host for this summit. Can I also acknowledge Phil Baty, the editor of Times Higher Education World Universities Rankings, and John Gill, the editor of Times Higher Education. Can I welcome all of the delegates here today, and I understand that there are 31 countries represented here today. It's so good to have you here in Queensland and here in Brisbane, and certainly to be participating in this summit, because I think there's certainly a lot of opportunities for you to hear about the Australian system, but also for us to learn about what is happening overseas as well. So if I just touch on a little bit about my background, as you've just heard from the Vice-Chancellor, I'm a graduate of this university in mechanical engineering. And at the time that I went through, there were only 2 girls in the class, so we were the first 2 mechanical engineering graduates from this university. Both of us, coincidentally, were called Karen, so the 2 Karens did end up graduating. And I think the thing that's important when we look back on that is that, and particularly in light of the theme of innovation, disruption and collaboration, is that when I look back on it, it would be easy to say, well, that both Karen and myself were disruptors, because we were somewhat changing the model of what had been the course in mechanical engineering. But the disappointing thing is that following all those years since we graduated, there hasn't been significant change in the areas of science, technology, engineering and maths in terms of the number of women that we have graduating from those sectors. And in fact, I do have a couple of stats here which are particularly interesting. So across all fields of education in Australia, women account for 58% of all undergraduate students, but just 16% in information technology and just over 15% in engineering and related technologies. So disappointingly, in about the not quite 30 years since I graduated, there has not been a marked change in the percentage of graduates coming through in engineering in particular. And we certainly have to work hard to make sure that we change that. But we also have to be very mindful in Australia of what our skills needs are going to be for the future. So I actually spend a lot of time when I'm talking to industry in particular, encouraging them to look at what their skills needs are now and to do some workforce planning so that they start to identify the occupations and the classifications that they are going to need for their expansion into the future, with sufficient lead time that universities and the government can put the planning in place to make sure that we have the trained people we need for the jobs of the future. There are some major construction, major build projects being looked at in Australia now. They come online in the 2020s, and most notably that is rail and in the defence industry. Now, quite frankly, we're in 2017. For a ramp up in 2020, we are already in a position where we have to start taking immediate action to make sure that we are training the graduates that we need. Now, my specific area is vocational education and skills, and there are some real issues for us in the apprenticeship areas to make sure that we are bringing in sufficient skilled workers there. But if we then go on to universities, there are jobs for engineers, for scientists that we have to be looking at, particularly for just the rail and the defence industry projects that we are bringing online. Workforce planning is an essential part of what we have to do. Now, this is where I think that young universities have an opportunity to play a key role, because the perception of a young university is that it is agile, it is nimble, it is there to respond to the needs of industry. So there are some opportunities for young universities to effectively be world leading in the innovation and disruption areas, but also to start looking at what the forward planning could be and making sure that the graduates that you are producing are job ready and properly trained for the jobs of the future. So they're probably the key messages that I'd like you to consider in your deliberations today. But the final one that I'd like to leave with you, final thought, is in relation to the whole disruption and innovation agenda. Now, many of us who have been involved in innovation in many shapes and forms for a number of years are quite comfortable with that. But there are many people who fear disruption and are concerned that innovation, if they consider it as being more than the next app on their phone, but innovation is potentially going to lead to them being replaced and for there to be job losses as a result of that. I think that one of the key issues that we all need to be working on is how we can communicate that in fact innovation and disruption will lead to different jobs, not necessarily job losses into the future. It's a key part of what we as a government are trying to achieve, but we can't do it alone, and we need universities, particularly our young universities, to be part of that agenda, to bring people with them, to show that, that the way of the future that is a result of disruption and future innovation is a positive for everyone, no matter what their age or their skill or their background. And if we can communicate that message, then we have the best possible chance of going forward positively and meeting our skills needs for the future. I wish you all the very best in your deliberations at the conference today. I look forward to hearing the outcomes from today. I'm very outcome focused, as I'm sure many people in this room are as well, so I look forward to hearing more about those outcomes. Thank you very much for having me here this morning.